Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. I hope you are all fine and must be enjoying your life with your family. Students, this is our lecture number 32 for the subject of operations management and probably the last lecture. In this lecture we will discuss some important topics like supply chain management and inventory management. Again, these are two very important issues which the operations manager should give the due importance, and we will discuss these concepts and what is the strategic importance of these topics for the operations manager. So we will discuss this particular topic in our today's lecture, but let's have a brief review what we discussed in our last lecture. Students, in our previous lecture we discussed about the location strategy, that what is the strategic importance of location for operations, and we discussed that there can be the different points and factors which can be helpful for the operations of the organizations in order to have the competitive advantage for the organization. Most importantly, we use cost factor as a competitive advantage, and every organization is actually interested to reduce their cost, and especially if that objective is being achieved with respect to the particular location, so that is always good for the organization. Other than cost, there may be the other factors which can give you the competitive advantage with respect to the location. That is the availability of the different resources, the quality resources, and the cheap labor may also be available at a particular location. So these are some of the factors which can give the idea to the operations manager that how they can locate the facility or the production capacity or the distribution unit of its organizations, so that it can achieve the competitive advantage with respect to a particular location. There are some factors which can always affect the location decisions, and I also discussed in the previous lecture that the location is a sort of decision that is not a routine decision, and is a strategic decision. And once you have decided this particular decision and you have placed a particular site at a particular location, then it is very difficult for the operation manager to change the location. So it is very important for the managers that they should give the due care about the factors which can affect the location decisions. Then students, we discussed some important methods that how we can find out and evaluate the best location. So in these different methods we discussed that if we have the different alternatives, that is the different locations in any part of the world, then how we can use the different techniques in order to find the optimum location for your organization. So we discussed these very important methods, and one of the method was center of gravity method, in which we used that method of x coordinate and y coordinate in order to find the optimum location for the organization. And we also discussed the cost benefit analysis and the trade-off between the different types of cost, so that we can reduce the total cost by using that particular method. Then we also discussed the method in which we assign the different weights to some critical factors, and then we are able to find out the weighted average, and that weighted average may also help the operation manager in order to take the optimum decision about a particular location. Other than location, students, in our last lecture we also discussed the strategic importance of layout decisions. Now layout, again, in layout decisions the most important considerations for the operation manager, that whether the information flow within the organization is fluent or not, and there should not be any sort of a hindrance in the communication as well as in the movement of the material from one place to the other place. So that is the main objective the operations manager are always interested to achieve in the layout decisions. And again, like location decision, layout decision is also the strategic decision which have long-term impact on the viability of the organization, and it can also give the competitive advantage to any of the organization. Again, for the layout design and for the layout decision, the operations manager should take into account the different factors that can give the real competitive advantage for the organization. Then students, we discussed about the different types of layout, like office layout, that what should be the layout in the office settings and the working environment, so that the communication can be done in easy and convenient way within the office. And we also discussed the some other layouts like retail layout, that what should be the layout for a particular superstore and what should be the layout for the simple retail outlet. Again, the purpose is to accommodate the stores at the prominent locations, so that the customers can easily assess those items, and again that may increase the sales, and ultimately the profitability of the organization will be increased. Then students, we also discussed some warehouse, that how we should store the different items, and how we should decide the layout of a warehouse so that we can accommodate the maximum inventory in that limited space. And again, the inventory handling is a main issue which should be considered in that particular layout. Similarly, we also discussed some other layout patterns like product oriented layout and process oriented layout, that how again the movement of the material should be more convenient within the organization, and again the movement of workers should also be convenient, so that the production of the goods should be possible within the limited resources, and most importantly within the assigned time. So this is the importance of location decisions and layout decisions. Students, in our 2 days lecture, we will discuss another very important issue, that is the supply chain's strategic importance. That what is the strategic importance of supply chain management for the organizations. Then we will discuss some supply chain economics, that what are the different decisions which the operations manager should take, that whether we should make a particular product, or we should buy a particular product, or we should outsource a particular product. So these are the supply chain economics which can again have the strategic impact on the viability of the organization. And again, these sort of decisions are so important in finding out the optimum management of the organization's supply chain. And nowadays, supply chain is so important for the organization that sometimes we say that the competition among the different organizations is actually the competition among the different supply chains. The more efficient and effective supply chain an organization have, the more are the chances that they will have the competitive advantage and they can excel in future. So is the importance of supply chain management. Then students, there is again a strategic view of supply chain management, that is the ethics in supply chain. Now again, ethics may not have the short-term impact on the organization's profitability, but it do have the long-term impact, and it is very important to create a sort of environment in which everyone should know that what is right and what is wrong, and what is the way of doing certain things within the organization. And ultimately, if we are able to create an ethical environment within our supply chain, it can be very good for the organization, and it can be very helpful in achieving the predetermined objectives of the organization. Then students, the operations managers may have different supply chain strategies before them. They can opt for contacting with the different suppliers, and they can also opt for contacting a very few suppliers, but to maintain the good relationship with these few suppliers. Then there is a concept we will discuss like vertical integration, in which the operations manager can opt for either integrate in their operations business, especially with respect to the raw material or supplies business, or with the distribution business. And in this particular strategy, what the organizations do, they actually enter into the business of either to their suppliers or to the distribution channels. Then Kudzu networks. We'll also discuss this Japanese concept, and that is the concept like teamwork, that the different stakeholders like organization itself and the different suppliers should work like a team in order to achieve the common objectives. Then students, we will discuss the inventory related issues, and that what are the functions of inventory and what are the different types of inventory, what is the independent and dependent demand, and what is the difference between holding cost, ordering cost and setup cost. Then students, we will discuss a very important model, that is the basic economic order quantity model, that will help us that what quantity and at what time we should order for the different suppliers. And again, this model will help us to minimize the overall cost for the organizations. Supply chain management is the integration of the activities that procure materials and services, transform them into intermediate goods and the final product, and deliver them to customers. So you can see from this definition that supply chain management actually includes all of the activities which start right from the procurement of the raw material, and then we get that raw material into the transformation process or the conversion process, and then finally after the production of final goods and services, the activities involved in the distribution of those goods and services to the ultimate consumers. So all the activities involved within all of these extremes, that is procuring the raw material to the distribution of goods and services to the final products, all these activities are included in supply chain management. And again, as I told you, that competition is no longer between companies, it is between supply chains. So important is this supply chain management for the organizations. And again, the organization can always achieve its objectives efficiently and effectively if its supply chain is going to manage efficiently and effectively. So is the strategic importance of this supply chain management. Now students, there are the different activities which are actually involved in supply chain management, and it starts with the contact with the transportation vendors to transport the different goods and services to the customers, as well as to transport the goods from the supplier points to the organization's destination point. Then you'll have to take into account the different credit and cash transfers. Then we'll have to have the contact with the different suppliers, different distributors in order to distribute our goods and services. Then there are the different debtors and the creditors, you'll have to deal with them. Then warehousing and inventory, that is the most important issue which is to be considered by the operations management. And then the order fulfillment, again, that is again a very big issue in chain management. And most importantly, we'll have to share with the customers, we'll have to forecast, and we will have to have the good production information so that we can devise the good strategies for the organization. So these are the different activities and different concepts which are involved in supply chain management. Then students, often the organizations and especially the operations manager may have this sort of situation in which they will have to decide that whether they should make or manufacture a particular product on their own, or they should buy that particular product or suppliers or raw material from some other supplier. So this is again a very strategic decision for the organization. Now, what are the important guidelines that how we should take this particular decision, and the important reasons for making a particular product by the organization itself are that we want to maintain the core competencies. Sometimes the organizations want to retain their core competencies, and in order to retain the core competencies, they actually decide to make their own products. And they, in that particular case, they are not interested to buy the products from the other companies. Then lower production cost. If you have the facility and if you have the resources, then making the product yourself will always help the organization to reduce the cost. Then sometimes the suppliers available in the market are not so suitable and appropriate for the company, and sometimes they don't cooperate with the company, and again your reputation before the customers may be at stake if you are not going to deliver the products as per their requirements, as per their satisfaction. So in order to avoid this sort of situation, again the organization may decide that they should make their products. Then they want to assure the adequate supply, quantity or delivery. So in order to assure the required quality and quantity, they decided to make their own products. They sometimes also interested to utilize the surplus labor or the facilities. So if the organization already have some surplus labor, they can always use this labor in the production of their goods on their own. Then students, they want to obtain the desired quality, and they cannot sacrifice on the different suppliers for maintaining the particular quality. And again, in order to remove the supplier collusions, in order to save the organization's stake against the suppliers' specific issues, sometimes it is not possible for the organizations to bargain with the suppliers on their own terms. Sometimes the suppliers want to have the transactions on their own terms, so that is not the case sometimes for the company to accept these particular conditions. So again, students, these are some of the reasons which can guide the organizations or the operations manager that they should make the product on their own. Now, reasons for buying. Now students, again we are not talking about the final products in this particular case, but this may be the case with some semi-finished goods or some other supplies which may be needed in the production of your final goods and services. So again, what are the different reasons which can guide the operation manager that they should buy those products or semi-finished goods or something else from the other suppliers or companies? In that particular case, the management will feel free to deal with its core competencies. Now, students, this is again a very important reason that sometimes management wants to have more flexibility in order to fully concentrate on their main competencies or the production of their final goods and services. So in order to concentrate fully, they can give the option of buying the products from some other companies. Then again, lower acquisition cost may also be the reason for buying from the other company. Then preserve the supplier commitment. Again, if the suppliers are committed and well cooperative with you, then again you can always buy the different suppliers from that supplier. Obtain the technical or management ability. Again, this is the reason that in order to have the technical ability, you can buy the product and then again you can work on that product, and in future you may opt to produce on their own. Inadequate capacity, that is the very important reason. Sometimes you don't have the capacity to make on your own, and that's why you rely on the other suppliers for supplying the particular supplies. So students, these are some of the reasons which can again give the guideline to the managers that whether we should buy the particular product or we should opt for some other alternative. Outsourcing again is a very incoming trend in today's organizations. And in this process, what the organization do, it transfers the traditional internal activities and resources of a firm to outside vendors. So sometimes the different activities related to the chain management and supply chain, they can always transfer this particular activities to some other outside vendor. Now, the organization wants to utilize the efficiency that comes with specialization, because sometimes the other companies have specialization in a particular activity. Now suppose, students, there is a packaging company which has this specialization with respect to the packaging. So if you want to have the packaging for your own products and services, of course sometimes it will be feasible to give the assignment of packaging of your products to that particular specialized company, and sometimes it may not be feasible to have your own packaging plant, and again you have to concentrate and you'll have to invest your own resources. So that is the case in which the different companies may be interested to outsource the certain activities. Then firms outsource information technology, accounting, legal, logistic, and production. So that is an emerging trend in today's organization in order to outsource some of the activities to the other vendors. Again, what are the ethics in the supply chain? Ethics, again, students, have the long-term impact on the organization's viability as well as the profitability. And I told you that change management is a very broad perspective, and they will have to take into account right from the procurement of the raw material up to the supply of the final products and services to your customers. So within all that activities and tasks, the ethics should always be placed in the operations. And in today's environment, opportunities for unethical behavior are enormous and temptations are high. So in order to deal and combat with this sort of environment, we should have the code of ethics in place. Many companies have strict rules and codes of conduct that define the acceptable behavior. So it is very important to be defined within the organization that what is the acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior, what is considered good and what is considered bad in the organizational context. So these rules and these code of ethics should always be placed in organizations. Institute for Supply Management has developed a detailed set of principles and standards for ethical behavior. So the different organizations can always have a sort of guideline from the Institute for Supply Management in order to have the code of ethics within their own organizations. Then, friends, there are different supply chain strategies. Sometimes we are interested to negotiate with many suppliers, and in some cases we want to concentrate on the few suppliers in order to have the good partnership with those suppliers. And sometimes we may be interested in the vertical integration. Again, vertical integration means either we are entering into the business of our suppliers, or we may be entered into the business of our distributors. Kaitsu, again, the Japanese concept of building the team environment within the organization, and virtual companies that use suppliers on an as needed basis. That is, whenever there is a need, they can contact with the respective suppliers, but not on the regular basis. So the first strategy, sometimes the organizations may be interested to contact with the many suppliers, and that is the case when they are dealing with the different sort of commodities. Purchasing it is typically based on price. So in this particular strategy, basically the suppliers are being selected on the basis of lower cost, and often the different quotations are being invited from the different suppliers, and the lowest bidder is always being offered to supply the certain raw material or certain goods required by the organization. So the basic point is that in this sort of strategy there is a sort of competition among the different suppliers, and most probably the supplier is being selected on the basis of lowest quotation and lowest cost. And in this particular case, again, the supplier is responsible for technology, expertise, forecasting, cost, quality and delivery, and because there is a lot of competition among the different suppliers, so they will have to care about all of these important factors. Then sometimes, students, we don't concentrate on too many suppliers, but the buyers forms longer term relationships with fewer suppliers. Actually, they want to have this sort of partnership with few suppliers, and in order to build the long term relationships, this is a very good strategy. Now it creates value through the economies of scale and learning curve improvements. Again, we have talked about the economies of scale concept and learning curve concept, and by doing the business with certain suppliers on the basis of certain partnership and on the basis of long-term perspective, again the economies of scale and learning curve concept can give the due benefit to the organization. Then suppliers more willing to participate in JIT programs and contribute design and technological expertise. So in this sort of strategy, suppliers have a sort of partnership with the organization, and they want to share their ideas with the organization so that their production challenges can be met more efficiently and effectively. Cost of changing suppliers is huge in this particular strategy, because you have already developed a long-term relationship with the suppliers. So sometimes it may not be very feasible for the organization to leave these partners. So the cost of changing your partners may be big in this particular case. Then students, vertical integration is another concept through which we can achieve some of the operations objectives. There are two types of vertical integration. One is the forward integration and the other one is backward integration. In backward integration, what happens that the particular company enters into the business of its suppliers, and instead of buying the supplies from a particular supplier, what the company do, they make its own plant in order to have the raw material on their own. So if this is the situation, then it is referred as backward integration. In forward integration, what happens, the company don't enters backward, that is to the business of suppliers, but it enters into the business of its distributors, and they starts having their own channels for distributing their products and services. So this situation and this approach is termed as forward integration. Now students, again, what is the benefit of this vertical integration? You can always achieve the economies of scale objectives by this vertical integration, but another point is that you must have the capacity to build your own plant and to enter into the business of supplier or into the business of distributors. But once you have entered, then again you may have the advantage of economies of scale, and your cost of production may be reduced on long-term basis. No doubt there will be initial investment and initial capital cost, but long-term cost may always be reduced by using this sort of strategy. So students, in vertical integration, the organization develops the ability to produce goods and services previously purchased. Integration may be forward towards the customer or backward towards the suppliers. It can improve the cost, quality and inventory, but requires capital, managerial skills and demand. So that is very important. If the demand of the product is not so high, then there may not be any need to enter into the vertical integration. Sometimes it's risky in industries with rapid technological change, so sometimes it may not be feasible for the different organizations to deal with this rapid technological change environment. So in that particular case, this strategy may be risky for the organization. Then students, there is another concept that is the Kursu network concept, and that is basically, Kursu is a Japanese term, and the ultimate purpose of this strategy is again building the team environment, and it is a middle ground approach between few suppliers and vertical integration. Now again, how it is in between that few suppliers and vertical integration? In this sort of strategy, actually we don't enter into the business of the suppliers, but we starts having the teamwork with the suppliers as a very good and strategic partners with the suppliers, and the suppliers becomes part of the company coalition actually, and the relationship with the suppliers is sometimes like that suppliers itself think themselves the part of the company, and they often provide the financial support for the suppliers through ownership or the loans. And in this approach, the company also provides the financial support for the suppliers through ownership or loans. Then members expect long-term relationships and provide technical expertise, and stable deliveries may extend through several levels of supply chain. So this is the sort of case in which we develop the relationship with our suppliers to the extent that suppliers becomes the part of the organization indirectly. There are significant management issues in controlling a supply chain involving many independent organizations. Again, students, because in supply chain management the operations manager will have to deal with the different stakeholders, therefore it is very important for the organization to have a sort of mutual agreement on goals, so that the suppliers and the different other stakeholders may be helpful for the organization, and they can contribute toward the organizational efforts so that the ultimate objectives may be achieved. And this is a sort of relationship based on trust, and compatible organizational cultures should always have been developed in the supply chain environment. So these are the important things which have the due importance in order to manage the supply chain efficiently and effectively. So students, this is all about the supply chain management, and we discussed about the importance of supply chain management, and what activities are actually involved in supply chain, and what are the different strategies we can always opt in managing our supply chain. Another important issue with respect to the operations management is managing the inventory. Now again, students, this is again a very important topic and issue which can always be helpful for the operations manager in order to give the competitive advantage for its own organization. Inventory is actually anything that can be kept for future demand. There are two important perspectives with respect to the inventory, that is the planning and controlling. And within these perspectives, we are actually interested in the different questions, that is where to buy and how much to buy and when to buy. So these are the strategic questions which the operations manager should ask itself when he is interested to manage the inventory efficiently and effectively. And students, again, the research says that one of the most expensive assets of many companies, representing as much as 50% of the total invested capital. So this is a very important figure, that sometimes this inventory management may be so expensive for the organizations that it can drastically affect the long-term viability as well as the profitability of the organization. So it is very important for the operations manager that he should have the balance between the inventory investment and the customer service. So we'll have to always be interested in minimizing the inventory cost. So once again, there are different functions of inventory, and one of the function of inventory management is to decouple or separate the various parts of the production process. And actually we are interested in the storage of the different inventory for the reason that sometimes within the production process, those products or those raw material may be required at any point of production. And to decouple the firm from the fluctuations in demand and provide the stock of goods that will provide a selection for the customers. So in order to ensure the in-time stock of the different products, sometimes we are interested in stocking of the inventory. And again, sometimes the organizations wants to have the advantage of quantity discounts. So what they do, they buy in bulk and then stored in their warehouses. But sometimes again this strategy may not work, and that inventory handling and inventory storage may be more expensive, you cannot imagine. So one of the reason of that storing the inventory is to hedge against the inflation. So again, the organization sometimes is interested to store the different material, so that in future there may be the chances of inflation. So these reasons may work, but most importantly, we should not increase our storage cost to the extent that it can start the impact on the profitability of the organization. Students, again, there are the different types of inventory, and one is the raw material that is being purchased but not processed. So raw material is the material which is not having processed, and this is the one of the type of inventory. Then the other inventory is work in process. Now again, this is a sort of material which has undergone some change but not completely processed, and a function of cycle time for a product. This is very important. Now cycle time, what is the cycle time? It is the time required to place the order and to receive the goods. The difference between the placement of the order and the receipt of the goods at the organization's location is termed as cycle time. So work in process again is the type of inventory. Then MRO, that is maintenance, repair and operations related inventory. It is necessary to keep the machinery and processes productive. Now this is sort of inventory which may be required at any time for the maintenance of your machinery or for repair and other operating requirements of your machinery. So that inventory which may be required for the maintenance purposes and for the repair purposes, that may be termed as MRO. Then students, final goods, and that is the goods which are completed after the production process, and these finished goods are now awaited for the final shipment to the ultimate customers. So these are the four different types of inventory an organization may have. So again, the operations manager should ask itself that how inventory items can be classified and how accurate inventory records can be maintained. Now this inventory record maintenance is again a very important perspective of inventory management. So accurate records are a critical ingredient in production and inventory systems, because it allows the organization to focus on what is needed, and it is necessary to make precise decisions about ordering, scheduling and shipping. So students, we cannot make these strategic decisions that what to order, when to schedule and when to ship our products and services unless we have the proper inventory record in place. So it is very important to keep up-to-date record of inventory, and periodically again we'll have to update all of that record, so we can make the important decisions related to supply chain management. Incoming and outgoing record keeping must be accurate, that what inventory is coming in the warehouse and what inventory is being flowed out of the warehouse, and stock rooms should also be secure. So there is another important issue, that is the safety issue, that we'll have to make our warehouses safe, and we'll have to make our inventory safe actually, because sometimes these safety issues can be so dangerous for the organizations. There are two types of demands, that is the independent demand and dependent demand. Independent demand is the demand for the item which is independent of the demand for any other item in inventory. So the demand of one inventory in this independent demand case does not depend on the demand of some other inventory. So this is the independent demand. And what happens in dependent demand? It is the demand for item which is dependent upon the demand of some other item in the inventory. So students, there may be the different items which are depending on some other items So if the demand of a particular item depends on some other item, so that demand is said to be the dependent demand. There are three important types of cost we will discuss in this particular topic, that is the holding cost, ordering cost, and setup cost. So let's discuss, students, what is the difference between these different types of cost. Holding cost, it may also be termed as carrying cost. This is the cost of holding or carrying the inventory over time. Now students, carrying the inventory and the storage of the inventory is not costless. It may sometimes bear a lot of cost, which can again have the negative impact on the profitability of the organization. So all that cost which is involved in holding and carrying the inventory, that is termed as holding cost. Then ordering cost, the cost of placing an order and receiving goods. Again students, the placement of the different orders to our suppliers is not always free of cost. You may know that there may be the different activities involved in placing the order. You may have to prepare the quotation. There may be different sort of clerical work. Again, there may be the time which can be consumed for the obtaining the different quotations. Then again, there may be other activities which are not costless activities actually. So all the cost that is being incurred in placing an order and the till the goods are received, that is known as ordering cost. Then students, there is another type of cost, that is setup cost, and this is the cost to prepare a machine or process for manufacturing an order. Now once the goods are received or the raw material is being received, you cannot immediately put those raw material into the machine. Sometimes you'll have to redefine or you'll have to work on a particular process or machine in order to start the production. So that particular cost which may be incurred to prepare a machine or process for manufacturing an order, that may be called as setup cost. So these are the three types of cost. Students, in our today's topic, we will discuss a very important model, that is the basic EOQ model, that is the economic order quantity model. And before discussing that EOQ model, it is important to discuss the different assumptions, that what are the limitations and what are the different assumptions for this particular model. There are 6 assumptions. The first assumption is demand is known, constant, and independent. So whenever we will use this EQ model, it should be assumed that the demand of the good is known, it remains constant, and it is independent and not depending on the demand of some other goods. Then again, second assumption is lead time is known and constant. Again, the lead time is the time which is the time between the placement of the order and till your goods are being received at your site, that is the lead time. So again, it is being assumed in this particular model that lead time is known and constant. Then receipt of inventory is instantaneous and complete, that is, inventory is not being supplied in batches, and that is being supplied lump sum according to the requirement of the organization. So that is another assumption. Then quantity discounts are not possible, so we are not taking into account any quantity discounts when we will use this model, EOQ model. Only variable costs are setup and holding cost. So students, again, in this particular case we will discuss only 2 costs, that is holding cost and setup cost. And as I just told you that there are 3 different types of cost. So ordering cost and setup cost will be covered in that particular heading, that is the setup cost. When we use EOQ model, it means the setup cost in this particular case is the ordering cost plus setup cost. So we will not discuss this ordering cost as a separate type of cost. Then students, stockouts can be completely avoided. That is, the shortages can always be avoided when we are going to consider this EOQ model. So these are some of the assumptions of economic order quantity model. Now let's discuss some of the graphical representation of this EOQ concept. Now students, let's suppose that the current inventory level of any of the product in your organization is at 0. So this is the origin point at which the minimum inventory level is maintained, that is of course the 0. Now suppose you have the demand for the 200 products. Now what will happen? You will have to order for those 200 products. That may be the raw material, or that may be the suppliers for the final 200 products. So your inventory level will be increased up to this order quantity. Now this is actually represented the order quantity. As you can see that inventory level is on the y-axis and time is on the x-axis. So now you have the inventory level at this point, that is Q. Now what happens when you will start producing the goods and services? Of course this inventory will be consumed, and with the passage of time it will be reduced. After some time it will be at the stage which may be termed as average inventory on hand, that may be equal to Q by 2. So that particular level of inventory may be termed as average inventory, and again mathematically that may be represented as Q by 2. So this dotted line is represented here for the average inventory level on hand. Then students, again with the passage of time this inventory level will again decline because of the usage of material for the production of goods, and after particular time again the inventory level will be at 0. And again now there is no inventory in your stores. Now again what will happen? You'll have to again place the order. Again your inventory level will go up at this particular point, that is the point of order quantity, and again with the passage of time it will decline, will reach at that average inventory level, and again it will continuously decline till it becomes 0 after a particular time period, and this process will continue for the indefinite period. And this is the way the inventory usage and this is the actually inventory usage over time. Now students, again as I told you that the main objective of this inventory management concept is to minimize the overall cost, and we just discussed that there are two types of cost we can discuss in the economic order quantity. One is the holding cost and the other one is setup cost, and again setup or order cost, that is the same. Now if we draw these components of the cost in this particular graph by taking the order quantity on x-axis and annual cost on y-axis, we can have these sort of lines and curve. Now this is the curve for the setup cost and this is the line for holding cost. Now the total cost is equal to the holding cost plus setup cost. So if we add up both of these costs, we can get this curve for the total cost. So this is the curve for the total cost. So again students, actually we are interested to find out the optimal order quantity, and you can see in this particular graph that the order quantity will be optimal at the point of intersection of the holding cost curve and the setup cost curve. You can see that at this particular point what happens, that the holding cost and the setup cost will become equal. So at this particular point the order quantity will be optimum, and again if you extend this dotted line up to the total cost curve, you can see that on this curve this is the minimum point of that particular curve. So it is the point which actually refers to the minimum total cost. So in this way, by taking into account the holding cost and setup cost, we can find out the optimal order quantity for our operations. Now students, let's Q is equal to the number of pieces per order, that is the quantity ordered, and Q static is the optimal number of pieces per order, that is the quantity according to the economic order quantity model, and D is the total annual demand in units for the item which is kept as inventory. So D is the total demand which is kept as inventory. S is equal to the setup or ordering cost for each order. H is equal to the holding or carrying cost per unit per year. Then the annual setup cost, or we can also say this annual setup cost as total annual ordering cost. This will be equal to the number of orders placed per year multiplied by setup or order cost per order. So in this way, by multiplying these two terms, we can get the annual setup cost. Again students, the number of orders placed per year will be equal to the annual demand over number of units in each order. So if we replace this value by this, our formula for annual setup cost will be equal to D over Q multiplied by S. Again, D is the total annual demand, Q is the quantity ordered, and S is the total setup or ordering cost. So if we know the values of these three factors, we can calculate the total annual ordering cost. Now students, again we know about all of these quantities. Now suppose we want to calculate the annual holding cost. Annual holding cost is equal to the average inventory level multiplied by holding cost per unit per year, and you know that average inventory level is equal to Q by 2. This is the average inventory level, and again multiply by holding cost per unit per year. So this will be equal to Q over 2 multiplied by H. So what we did, we have now the formula for the total annual ordering cost, and we also have the formula for the annual holding cost, and annual setup cost is equal to D over Q multiplied by S, and annual holding cost is equal to Q over 2 multiplied by S. So if we want to calculate the total cost, what we can do, we can add up both of these costs. So optimal ordered quantity is found when annual setup cost equals annual holding cost. Students, we just discussed in the graph that optimal ordered quantity is that quantity ordered at which the holding cost and your setup cost or ordering cost becomes equal. So if we equate both of these equations which we have just calculated, that is the annual setup cost D over Q multiplied by S, annual holding cost, that is Q over 2 multiplied by H. If we equate both of these equations, we can easily calculate the value of Q, and the value of Q in this particular case will be equal to the square root of 2 ds divided by H. Now this is actually the optimal order quantity that is being obtained by equating the annual setup cost and the annual holding cost. So this Q is now the Q static, that is the economic quantity ordered, or the optimal number of pieces per order. So that is actually the quantity as per that EOQ model. So let's discuss an example. We'll have to determine the optimal number of needles to order. The annual demand is equal to 1000 units. The holding cost is equal to $0.5 per unit per year, and the setup cost is equal to $10 per order. So if we want to calculate the optimal number of needles or the optimal quantity ordered, then it will be equal to again 2 ds divided by H, and we will take the square root of these values, and it will be again, if we put the different values in this equation, we can get the optimal number of needles that is equal to 200 units. So in this case, by using this particular formula, we can always calculate the economic order quantity. So students, suppose we are interested in determining the optimal number of needles to order. Now again, in order to calculate the number of needles to be ordered, what information we have: annual demand again 1000 units, setup cost $10 per order, holding cost 0.5 per unit per year, and now we already know about the optimal order quantity, that is just being calculated as 200 units. So the expected number of orders will be equal to n, and this will equal to demand, that is the annual demand, or the order quantity, that is the optimal order quantity, and this will be equal to 1000, which is the annual demand, divided by 200, which is the optimal order quantity. So in this way we can get the expected number of orders as 5 orders per year. So we should place ideally 5 times the order in a year. Now again, students, let's suppose we are interested to find out the optimal number of needles to order. Again, the different information is given, and we can now put the different values in this formula, that is expected time between orders. T is equal to number of working days per year over capital N. We have already calculated capital N, which is equal to 5 orders per year. So if we consider that there are 250 working days in a year, 250 divided by 5, it will be equal to 50 days between orders. So what we can do, after every 50 days we will place our order. So students, you see that how we can find out the optimal order quantity, then how we can find out the optimal number of orders, as well as how we can find out the time framework, that after what time we'll have to replace the order. So important is that EOQ model, that we can always find out these optimum calculations by using this concept. So let's discuss that if we want to determine the optimal number of needles to order, and the different information is being provided, then the total annual cost will be equal to setup cost plus holding cost. So this is the formula for total annual cost, and if we put all of these values in this formula, we can get the total cost equal to $100. So this is the total cost we have just computed by putting all of the relevant information in this total cost formula. So students, EOQ model is a very robust model which can be helpful in many calculations, and these calculations may be so helpful for the operations manager for decision making. It works even if all the parameters and assumptions are not met. The total cost curve is relatively flat in the area of the EOQ, and when we refer to the graph, the total cost curve was more flatter than that holding cost or the setup cost. Now students, suppose the management underestimated the demand by 50%. Initially they decided the demand as 1000 units, but the actual demand was actually 1500 units. So previously we are supposing that they have underestimated their demand, and all the other information is same. Now what will be the impact on the total cost? Again, if we change the value of D from 1000 to 1500, our total cost will be equal to 125. So it means that the total annual cost increases by only 25%. The annual cost previously was 100, but now it has become $125. The actual EOQ for new demand is 244.9 units. So if we consider the new demand or the actual demand, the value of EOQ or the optimal quantity ordered will be equal to 244.9 units. So again, if we put all of this information in this total cost formula, we can have the total cost equal to $122.48, and you can see that only 2% less than the total cost of $125 when the order quantity was 200. So students, again, by using the EOQ concept, we can again find out the reorder points, and EOQ answers the how much question, that is how much we should order. The reorder point tells when to order, that is ROP, that is reorder point is equal to demand per day multiplied by the lead time for a new order in days. This will be equal to D multiplied by L, and now the D, that is the demand per day, will be equal to capital D, that is the annual demand over the number of working days in a year. So again, if we put this information, by supposing that the demand is equal to 8,000 units and there are 250 working days in a year, then the lead time for orders is 3 working days. Now that is again assumption, and we suppose that lead time order is 3 working days. So if we put these values in this formula, we can get the value of small d as per day demand. In this formula, D is the per day demand. This will be equal to capital D, that is the per year demand, divided by the number of working days, that is 8,000 divided by 250. It will be equal to 32 units. And again, reorder point will be equal to D multiplied by L, that is 32 units per day, we have just calculated, multiplied by 3 days, that is the assumed lead time. And again, the reorder point will be 96 units. Now it means that after the consumption and the usage of 96 units, you can place the order. So students, you see that how we can use that EQ concept in the calculation of different values, which can be so helpful for placing the order, the time for placing the order, and the quantity after which we should place the order. So important is the concept of EOQ. Students, this is the end of our today's lecture and the end of this subject as well. I feel very good that we successfully completed our course, and I hope that you all people must have worked with all the contents and with all the lectures I delivered, and I hope that I am being able to deliver the concepts of operations management to all of you, and I wish that you should excel not only in this particular subject, but with this degree as well as in your own life. So my good wishes are always with all of you. Good luck. Khuda Hafiz.